Hundreds of soldiers just rained down from military planes over Burkina Faso, fully armed, fully silent, and not part of any war. No warning, no explanation. Just a sudden burst of parachutes above Bobo-Dioulasso. So what was this operation? Why did over 500 troops take to the sky without a battle to fight? Let's find out. The skyfall began above Bobo-Dioulasso, a place most of the world knows for music, mangoes, and old colonial trains. But beneath its calm surface, Bobo is quietly becoming the military brainstem of Burkina Faso, a city not of tourists, but of tacticians. And in the middle of this city lies a zone so tightly regulated that most civilians have only seen its fences, never its function. This is CITAP-Burkina Faso's elite airborne training facility. CITAP is where gravity is challenged and war is rehearsed, not in theory, but with boots, bruises, and blood if necessary. The name might sound bureaucratic, but don't let that fool you. What happens inside this base is decisive, physical warfare preparation, engineered to train a soldier not just to fight, but to fall from the sky, land hard, and move fast. The very act of parachuting isn't glamorous here. It's violent, it's dangerous, and it's essential. Because in Burkina Faso's modern military playbook, land-based strategy isn't enough anymore. Terror doesn't respect roads, threats don't wait at borders, and the old method of sending trucks down highways simply can't respond quickly enough when insurgents attack villages in the dead of night. This is where CITAP steps in, a military breeding ground for speed, unpredictability, and vertical dominance. But why Bobo-Dioulasso? Why plant this kind of facility here and not in the capital, Ouagadougou? The answer is geography and legacy. Bobo sits at a crossroads of logistical power. It's far enough from the volatile north to be secure, yet close enough to deploy troops across multiple conflict zones in record time. It also inherits an important colonial and post-colonial military infrastructure, remnants from France's airborne experiments and Burkina Faso's early post-independence reforms. CITAP was built on that scaffolding, but over the past decade, it's evolved into something distinctly Burkinabe, leaner, grittier, and no longer dependent on Western trainers or external funding. The 2025 parachute jump campaign being staged here isn't just an exercise, it's a pressure test. More than 500 soldiers weren't just told to jump. They were forced to earn their wings through weeks of tactical, mental, and physical trials. CITAP doesn't produce parade ground soldiers, it breeds terrain-ready shadow units, soldiers who understand wind resistance, battlefield communication in mid-air, high-altitude acclimation, nighttime drops, emergency maneuvering, and the psychology of landing deep behind enemy lines. These troops are not performing for show. Every movement is tied to operational realism. There are no blanks, there are no shortcuts. The jumps simulate real-time deployments in regions like Saum, Yaga, Tapoa, or even across the porous borders into Mali and Niger, zones where insurgents are mobile, the terrain is brutal, and alliances can shift overnight. That's why CITAP's training doesn't end at the drop. It begins there. After hitting the ground, soldiers have timed objectives, reach coordinates, secure positions, or neutralize simulated enemy targets before extraction, all in real time, with full gear and under pressure. This is where Burkina Faso's military evolution quietly takes place. Not in five-star meetings, not through foreign lectures, but in dusty airstrips and sweat-drenched drills, where national survival is a daily assignment. CITAP is not just a place, it is a doctrine, a response to a new kind of war, one where your enemy doesn't wear a uniform, where conventional command structures collapse under tribal chaos, and where speed equals life. That's why the airborne training here isn't an add-on. It's the core. In the 2025 campaign, every soldier who jumped from those planes wasn't just proving courage. They were testing a national military theory in real-world physics. What happens in Bobo-Dioulasso now ripples far beyond its borders. The silent formations in the sky, the coordination on the radios, the muscle memory on impact. This is Burkina Faso shaping a military that can control chaos before it spreads. And what's most startling is that nobody saw this transformation coming. A country dismissed just a few years ago as dependent, destabilized, or disorganized is now training rapid deployment airborne units with surgical precision. in its cities, with its resources, and for its survival. But if this is happening behind the fences of CITAP, then the next question is chilling. Who are the soldiers they're preparing to face? Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. The truth is, you don't train hundreds of soldiers to jump from military aircraft without a reason. You don't pour months of resources into CITAP, drill soldiers to fall into enemy terrain, and teach them to operate alone if you're just playing defense. This is preparation for something darker, something mobile, evasive, and deadly, something that no border fence can keep out. So who are these paratroopers being trained to face? Burkina Faso isn't in a conventional war. It's in a phantom conflict, where enemies don't wear uniforms, don't hold territory for long, and don't announce their movements. The country is locked in a brutal struggle against asymmetric insurgency groups, primarily in the north and east. These aren't rebel armies from a neighboring state. They're networks of extremists, foreign-trained mercenaries, and ideologically warped militias with shifting allegiances and global funding trails. And they are everywhere. Over the past 5 years, entire provinces in Burkina Faso have been destabilized not by full-scale invasions, but by whispers, sudden attacks, and disappearing footprints. Villages are ambushed at night. Schools are torched. Roads are mined. The army isn't always fast enough to respond by land. That's why the 2025 parachute campaign is more than a drill. It's the birth of a strike doctrine tailored to enemies who vanish before the dust settles. These groups operate with a kind of cruel efficiency. They strike soft targets, markets, schools, rural townships, and disappear into forests, deserts, or even across international borders before security forces can organize. Their attacks aren't random. They're meant to erode trust, paralyze the local economy, and make civilians doubt their government's ability to protect them. And unfortunately, in some areas, they've succeeded. But Burkina Faso is adapting, not with speeches, but with speed. And that's where the paratroopers come in. In this kind of conflict, timing is everything. You can't wait 48 hours for ground convoys to assemble when a village is under siege. You need a force that can deploy from the sky in under an hour. A unit that can land on rooftops, in fields, on riverbanks, and immediately engage. Not just to fight, but to stabilize, to restore, to disrupt the rhythm of the insurgency. This isn't fantasy. It's already happening in trial operations across the country. Burkina Faso's airborne soldiers trained at CITAP are being embedded into reconnaissance missions, intelligence collection, and localized defense operations. They're trained not just to land and shoot, but to assess, adapt, and integrate with local terrain and populations. Some of the 2025 jump units have been equipped with mobile communication arrays, allowing them to set up satellite uplinks from remote forests to relay real-time battlefield data to command. Others are being trained to operate autonomously for 72 hours post-drop, carrying enough rations, ammunition, and tactical intelligence to run independent missions without waiting for backup. Why is this so critical? Because the enemy is not waiting. Every time a convoy is delayed or a village is unprotected, extremist factions gain more influence, more fear-based loyalty, and more recruits. They feed off slow reaction times and bureaucratic paralysis. That's why CITAP-trained troops are being positioned as the vanguard of a new military model, one that puts agility and aggression ahead of paperwork and politics. And make no mistake, this enemy isn't just fighting Burkina Faso. It's fighting the idea of a sovereign African state. These insurgents are fueled by external money, regional chaos, and the ghosts of foreign interventions gone wrong. Some of them are splinters of groups that once served Western objectives in Libya and the Middle East. Now, cut loose and well-armed, they see West Africa as their next laboratory of destruction. The rise of paratrooper strategy is Burkina Faso's counter to that madness. It's saying, you may be fast, but we are faster. You may be invisible, but we can land in your shadow. In this war, the sky is no longer a neutral space. It's a launch pad. And the most important part? These paratroopers don't just answer to orders. They answer to something deeper. A belief that the country cannot afford to be saved by anyone else. Not France, not ECOWAS, not the UN, just Burkina Faso soldiers. just parachutes, just resolve. But if the paratroopers are now the front line, then the next question becomes even more urgent. What happens once they land, and there's no one waiting to back them up? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Dropping from the sky is only half the story. The 2025 parachute jump campaign is not designed for spectacle. It's not about floating in neat formation or landing in parades. It's about impact, hard landings, immediate engagement, complete autonomy. Because the moment those soldiers hit the dirt, the real war begins, and they have no cavalry coming behind them. That's the terrifying beauty of Burkina Faso's new doctrine. Paratroopers don't just land, they operate alone. No tanks rolling in behind, no air cover circling above. These are self-contained units trained to function as commandos, medics, engineers, intelligence analysts, and survivalists all in one. Once they land, they become a living, breathing piece of the battlefield, gathering intelligence, protecting civilians, or eliminating insurgent threats without waiting for orders. This changes the entire rhythm of warfare in Burkina Faso. In the past, soldiers would arrive at the scene of an attack when the shooting had already stopped. Villages would lie in ruins. Survivors traumatized. The attackers, gone. But now, thanks to real-time aerial deployment, paratroopers are hitting the ground before the smoke has cleared, sometimes even during the attack itself. That means no time to regroup, no margin for error. Every second counts. So what exactly are they trained to do once their boots touch the soil? First, secure the perimeter. These are not urban battlefields. These are forests, dry plains, rocky hills, and flood-prone river zones. Enemies can blend in with farmers or vanish into the terrain. The first task is to assess immediate threat vectors, from hidden IEDs to ambushes disguised as civilians. Second, gain control of communications. Each unit carries a lightweight but highly encrypted communications setup, allowing them to connect not just to headquarters, but to local defense volunteers, civilian authorities, and nearby patrol teams. These tools can turn a single drop team into the nerve center for a whole regional counteroffensive. Third, provide stabilization. That means more than engaging targets. It means evacuating wounded civilians, protecting schools, retrieving intelligence from hostile zones, and gathering real-time environmental data for drone or artillery units. In some scenarios, these teams are even tasked with setting up temporary command posts to hold ground until reinforcements arrive. Sometimes hours, sometimes never. What makes this more remarkable is that Burkina Faso isn't copying anyone else's model. This isn't a clone of American shock and awe or a French counterinsurgency template. This is something far more local, far more grounded in the reality of Sahel warfare, where infrastructure is limited, GPS is unreliable, and danger isn't always loud. The country is building a military strategy based on improvisation, endurance, and direct human trust, not massive war machines or foreign contractors. And for many of these soldiers, the landing site is not just a mission, it's home. Some were born in nearby villages, some have family in surrounding regions. These aren't strangers dropped into distant war zones. These are sons of the soil returning with guns, radios, and a promise to defend what was once abandoned. That psychological advantage is immeasurable. It turns the battlefield into something personal. This isn't just a fight against insurgents, it's a recovery mission for the nation's dignity. The moment a paratrooper hits the ground, he isn't just a soldier. He becomes a symbol of return, a walking answer to the question villagers have asked for years. Will anyone ever protect us? But that burden is heavy, because once they land, failure is not an option. There is no fallback plan. There are no excuses. These soldiers are taught to assume that if they die, the village dies with them. That pressure creates a mental discipline unlike anything in conventional warfare. That's why the 2025 campaign placed enormous emphasis on psychological conditioning, endurance tests, and multi-role adaptability. Soldiers are put through brutal nighttime landings, zero-visibility combat drills, and forced isolation missions to simulate being cut off after a compromised drop. They're even trained to turn local resources into tools, using farm equipment for defense, setting up barricades with wood, and communicating through village elders when electronics fail. Because this war is not just technological, it is cultural, psychological, human. The goal isn't just to kill insurgents. The goal is to reclaim lost space, mentally and physically. And so, the battlefield has changed. Landing is now a beginning, not an end. A drop zone is no longer a waypoint. It's a frontline outpost. A single soldier is no longer a fighter. He is the state in miniature. But if this is how Burkina Faso fights with what it has, then what happens when this airborne doctrine starts scaling up across the entire Sahel? What started in Bobo-Dioulasso is no longer staying in Bobo-Dioulasso. The 2025 parachute jump campaign may be a national operation, but its echoes are already bouncing across the entire Sahel region. It's no longer just about how Burkina Faso lands its soldiers. It's about how those landings could shift the balance of power between states, insurgents, and foreign meddlers across multiple borders. Here's the quiet truth. CITAP is becoming more than a military school. It's becoming a blueprint. And if the signs are correct, Burkina Faso may be turning its airborne doctrine into a pan-Sahel strategy, drawing in its closest allies and creating something that hasn't existed in West Africa since colonial times, a unified borderless strike force that answers to no Western command. Let's connect the dots. In 2023, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger formed a landmark alliance, the Alliance of Sahel States AES, with the goal of mutual defense and political coordination in the face of rising insecurity and regional isolation. But words only go so far. Alliances need teeth. And what Burkina Faso is now developing through its parachute campaign may be the very military muscle that gives AES its first real operational edge. Why airborne forces? Because when you're fighting a fragmented enemy that moves between countries with ease, you need a force that can move just as fast, or faster. And unlike road-bound ground troops, airborne units don't care about where one border ends and another begins. They don't wait for permission. They don't need clean runways. With the right coordination, they can deploy in minutes from one AES nation to another, breaking the spine of insurgency networks that have thrived by exploiting these border gaps. Now imagine this: soldiers trained in Bobo-Dioulasso dropping into eastern Niger to intercept a fleeing insurgent convoy, or Malian paratroopers joining Burkina Faso forces in defending a corridor near Komondjari. With synchronized doctrines, shared command signals, and unified tactics, the AES alliance could launch joint airborne interventions faster than ECOWAS can hold an emergency meeting. This is not a theory. Quiet coordination is already underway. High-ranking sources within the Burkina Faso defense establishment have hinted at multi-country parachute drills, where troops from Niger and Mali will train alongside Burkina Faso's elite units at CITAP. These exercises are being planned without foreign oversight, and that's what makes them unprecedented. They're not being supervised by AFRICOM, by France, or by UN peacekeepers. They're being designed by Africans, for Africa, using African terrain, threats, and solutions as their baseline. The logic is revolutionary. For decades, West African military doctrine has been built on a borrowed model, often French, occasionally American, and always conditional. Troops were trained to wait for NATO guidance, to call in external air support, or to rely on peacekeeping missions. But CITAP's program is erasing that dependency, proving that effective strike capability can be built from within, scaled regionally, and deployed independently. There's a geopolitical consequence to this as well. If AES airborne units begin to operate across borders with seamless integration, ECOWAS becomes weaker. So does any Western presence that relies on fragmented national command structures to maintain leverage. Paratrooper-led operations by AES states would make it harder for external actors to control intelligence flow, monitor weapons movement, or dictate conditions for military aid. In short, it's a militarized form of sovereignty, stitched together with parachutes and war drills. But there's another layer, and it's psychological. For too long, insurgents in the Sahel have benefited from a myth of invincibility. They've counted on state borders as shields, on slow-moving ground forces as advantages, and on poorly equipped national armies as guarantees of survival. But when word spreads that Burkina Faso, Malian, and Nigerian paratroopers can land anywhere, at any time, that myth begins to collapse, and so does their morale. Civilians too begin to see something else. A regional army that doesn't arrive with pamphlets, but with parachutes, not after the damage is done, but during or before. That's how trust is rebuilt. That's how legitimacy is restored, not just in the eyes of villagers, but in the minds of regional actors looking for alternatives to Western-backed instability. So what does this mean? It means the 2025 parachute jump campaign isn't just an event. It's a prototype for regional war readiness. It's a hint at what a truly independent African military structure could look like: borderless, airborne, coordinated, and unapologetically sovereign. If Burkina Faso can fund its army alone, why can't richer African nations? Who fears independent paratroopers more, insurgents or foreign powers? Let us know in the comments section. Is this the start of Africa's first truly sovereign military alliance? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.